Today is Sunday, August 16th, 2026, and today is National Tell a Joke Day, which means if you've been saving a joke for the right moment, today is apparently the moment. Just remember, the person saying, "I've got one," is usually having a much better time than everyone else. And August 16th gives us a battle named for a place where it didn't happen. A man looking down from nearly 20 miles up and deciding the quickest way home was to step out. And 4 musicians who walked into a New York club and helped change what rock music could sound like. Welcome to Wait, That's Random, This Day in History. I'm C.L. Burns, voice actor, audiobook narrator, and your guide through the moments where humanity somehow became both impressive and ridiculous simultaneously. The Battle of Bennington has a small problem with its name. It didn't happen in Bennington. It didn't even happen in Vermont. The fighting took place near Wallamsack, New York, about 10 miles from Bennington, which feels a little misleading. At least Gettysburg had the decency to happen in Gettysburg. So how does a battle fought in New York end up with a Vermont name? In the summer of 1777, British General John Borgan was leading an army south from Canada towards Albany. His plan was to take control of the Hudson River and cut New England off from the rest of the colonies. It was an ambitious plan, but it had a very practical problem. An army needs food, horses, wagons, and supplies. Borgan's men were running short on all of them. He heard there was a supply depot in Bennington, so he sent Lieutenant Colonel Frederick Baum and several hundred men to take it. That's where the name comes from. Baum was headed for Bennington, but just never made it there. Waiting for him was a force of militia commanded by John Stark. These weren't polished professional soldiers. Most were farmers and townspeople who had arrived in their own clothes, carrying their own weapons. And here's another detail that caught me off guard. Vermont wasn't a state yet. It had declared itself an independent republic just a few months earlier. Heavy rain delayed the fighting on August 15th. When the weather cleared the next day, Stark's men moved around Baum's defensive position and attacked from several directions at once. The British force was surrounded and overwhelmed. Reinforcements arrived later, but they were driven back too. Borgan lost roughly 10% of his army, failed to get the supplies he desperately needed, and lost valuable time. 2 months later, his campaign ended with his surrender at Saratoga. So one of the most important American victories leading up to Saratoga carries the name of the town the British were trying and failing to reach. And if you want another August 16th moment where the location is difficult to picture, try standing over New Mexico with almost 20 miles of air beneath your boots. Joseph Kittinger was an Air Force test pilot working on Project Excelsior, which sounds like something that Stan Lee would have made up. The purpose was to find out whether a pilot could safely escape from an aircraft at extremely high altitude. That question had become urgent because military planes were flying higher and faster than ever before. Nobody really knew what would happen if a pilot had to eject near the edge of space. So Kittinger went up there to find out. Not in an airplane either. He rode beneath a massive helium balloon in a small open gondola. There was no enclosed cabin around him. Just Kittinger in a pressure suit, surrounded by equipment, watching the ground slowly disappear beneath him. On August 16, 1960, the balloon reached 102,800 feet. I had to stop and read that number again. That's more than 19 miles above the Earth. Not technically outer space, but high enough that the sky above him had turned black and the curve of the planet was visible below, because the Earth is not flat, it's round. Then Kittinger stood up, moved to the edge of the gondola, and stepped off. He fell for 4 minutes and 36 seconds before his main parachute opened. During that freefall, he dropped roughly 16 miles and reached a speed of more than 600 miles per hour. 600 miles per hour, with no airplane around him. His parachute opened at about 14,000 feet. That's the height of Pikes Peak. and the entire trip back down lasted just over 13 minutes. Then Joseph Kittinger landed safely in the Mexico desert. I've taken elevators with more hesitation than he showed leaving a balloon at 102,000 feet. 14 years later, on that same date, 4 guys from Forest Hills carried a very different kind of experiment into a small club on the Bowery. The club was CBGB, and the 4 guys were Joey, Johnny, Dee Dee, and Tommy Ramone. August 16, 1974 is sometimes called the Ramones' first performance. That isn't quite right. They had played for an audience once before, back in March, but the band looked very different. Joey was playing drums. Dee Dee was trying to sing while playing bass. Johnny was on guitar, and Tommy was managing them from the sidelines. It wasn't working. Dee Dee couldn't sing and play at the same time, so Joey moved out from behind the drums and became the lead singer. Tommy tried to find someone who could play the simple, relentless beat he had in mind. Eventually, he realized it would be easier to just play it himself. That gave them the lineup people picture when they hear the name Ramones. On August 16th, all 4 of them walked onto the stage at CBGB together for the first time. They were opening for a band called Angel and the Snake, which eventually became Blondie. That bill turned out to be a little more important than anyone in the room could have known. CBGB wasn't built to be the birthplace of punk rock. The letters stood for country, bluegrass, and blues, which is what owner Hilly Crystal originally expected the club to feature. Instead, he got the Ramones. Their set lasted about 15 minutes. The songs were fast, stripped down, and so short that some were over before an audience can figure out what was happening. There were no long guitar solos or dramatic pauses. Dee Dee counted them in, and the band charged forward. 1, 2, 3, 4. What gets me now is how little the finished version was there at the beginning. They had already changed instruments, changed roles, and put their manager behind the drums. Even that first CBGB set reportedly started coming apart as they played it. But underneath the confusion was something nobody else sounded like. They kept returning to CBGB, tightened everything up, and turned those short bursts of noise into a sound that traveled around the world. And the leather jackets, the attitude, and the unmistakable physical presence brings us to today's birthday. Julie Newmar turns 93 today. Most people immediately know her as Catwoman from the 1960s Batman television series. She only played the role for 2 seasons, but she created a version of the character that people are still imitating. The voice, the movements, the way she could make every line sound as though she knew something Batman didn't. It was all deliberate. Newmar had trained as a dancer from childhood. She graduated from high school at 15 and worked as a dancer and choreographer before establishing herself on Broadway. She won a Tony Award for the marriage go-round before Catwoman ever entered the picture. I knew about Catwoman. I wasn't expecting to find patent diagrams. Julie Newmar was also an inventor. She designed clothing and received patents for a brassiere and body-shaping pantyhose. One of those patents is officially titled Pantyhose with Shaping Band for Cheeky Derriere Relief. There are phrases you'd expect to encounter in government documents. Cheeky derriere relief is not one of them. She also built a successful real estate business, returned to UCLA to study how to manage it properly, became a fashion model again in her 60s, and had an entire movie named after her. To Wong Fu, thanks for everything, Julie Newmar. She could have spent the rest of her career being introduced as Catwoman. Instead, she kept giving people new reasons to introduce her. Happy birthday, Julie Newmar. There is something I like about people who stop treating the accepted version as final. They don't always have the right location, the right equipment, or a polished first attempt. They simply recognize what exists now doesn't have to be the finished version. From the outside, that can look strange, reckless, or insignificant. Later, once it works, everyone talks about it as though the outcome had been obvious. It almost never was. Anyway, if you're going anywhere today, check the map before you leave. Otherwise, you may end up with a New York battle named after a town in Vermont, or taking the Joseph Kittinger shortcut home. And that reminds me of something Stephen Wright once said. Everywhere is walking distance, if you've got the time. If you'd like to explore more of my narration work, projects, or general historical wandering, you can find it all at waitthat'srandom.com. I'm C.L. Burns, and I appreciate you stopping by the timeline for a while. I'll see you tomorrow.